Paul Priebe, the Director of Fluid Management Technologies at Sartorius Stedim Biotech, is going to present innovative raw material management and product design strategy for enhanced quality assurance of supply, validation, and change control of single-use systems. Paul.
Thank you, Brian. So what those words really mean is talking about a product development and how to address supply chain strategies during a product development cycle to really deal with the challenges of the market today. So in order to really put a background to that development, I'll talk about market dynamics and challenges, then launch into a film development strategy that embraced those market challenges, and then wrap it up. So today we see a growing implementation of single-use technology. I think it's pretty well acknowledged that the single-use market is growing at a greater pace than the underlying biotechnology market, and that shows enhanced penetration. And so I think what that says to both the suppliers of the industry and the customers of the single-use suppliers is that there is an underlying compelling value for single-use technology in the industry. It's been around roughly 20 years, and we still see growth rates that are faster than the market. So those growth rates are really underpinned by the clinical phases. So as molecules are being brought to market and getting through phase 2, phase 3, and being launched to the market, they're taking the technologies used to manufacture these molecules with them into commercial production. And so that is a key element, is that the commercial use is driving the market growth of single-use technology. But also what we're seeing is a transition. So the applications traditionally, let's say 20 years ago and in the even 10 years ago, where single-use technology was primarily used in what we might call side streams or upstreams, so media and buffers primarily. But what we're now seeing is penetration across the entire across the entire bioprocess. So those are sort of the positive things that bring suppliers into this space, and these are the underpinnings of the growth. But now for some of the negative market dynamics. So here is a simple graphic that shows the complexity of the supply chain, and even this is somewhat simplified, for a single finished single-use system. So you can see as you go to N-1, N-2, N-3, N-4, the number of suppliers that are engaged in the supply of these systems is proliferating. And so the single-use system, the supply chain for single-use systems is rather complex. Now, there's a couple of formative events in the history of our industry, and if you're in the industry in January of 2003, then you may well remember this, is that West Pharmaceuticals, a supplier of elastomer stoppers for finished container closures, one of their facilities blew up. Now, while West had many facilities in their manufacturing network, in fact, some products that they sold to customers were only made in this one facility. And that really exposed our industry to the need for business continuity planning. So while they were engaged with a supplier that had many facilities, in fact, they were still sole-sourced because that facility only made those stopper products for them. There's another formative event is a few years ago, actually is in October of 2010, one of the suppliers of polypropylene used quite ubiquitously in our industry for component molding announced a change to one of the additives. And so this goes back to a sub-supplier of a sub-supplier of a sub-supplier obsoleting an optical brightener, one of the additives. So here we see that change control and relationships through the supply chain are critical, because we had a supplier, a sub-supplier of a sub-supplier that had no idea where their products were going, eventually ending up in our single-use systems, and they simply didn't care that by obsoleting these, they created an enormous change control effort for the entire industry. Another shot heard around the world, or one of the other formative events in our history here, is in March of 2013, Amgen published a paper in the PDA Journal where they identified a secondary degradant of one of the antioxidants used in the polyethylene film that had leached into the cell culture media and had actually killed the cells in their seed train. So they were seeing very, very low trace extractables or leachables in their process, and this was creating an issue. The investigation took several years to complete, and it was rather complex. And I think this brings to mind to me that there are still unknown unknowns about the interaction between bioprocesses and polymers. And in many ways, when you read the paper and you understand the dynamics of how this degradant came to be, because it's a secondary degradation product, it was actually dependent on exactly how the bags were handled, whether that antioxidant degradant existed or not. And for me, this then brings the axiom about BioProcess, which the agency always says the process is the product. It also holds true for plastic products brought to market for bioprocess use, that the process is the product, and you need to be in control of the entire process, or you may get unknown variation. So when I was researching the PD626 change control for this presentation, I actually found this disclaimer, which is actually written by the supplier of PD626 to the market. And essentially it's a lot of legalese, but what it says is that they're not responsible for how their products are used. And so I think what this says is that there's a very small subset of suppliers that are committed to the needs of our market space. Now, for those of you who are sort of keep in touch with a lot of these, with the single-use industry, there's an enormous effort today to create standards that are meaningful for single-use systems. And this is what some people call the alphabet soup of the standards writing bodies. All of these organizations are engaged in one way or another to try and move this along. And for me, without getting into the specifics, the takeaway for me is that implementation of single-use systems remains a challenge for end users. The fact that all of these alphabet soup organizations need to be involved and are putting a lot of energy in this shows that they're trying to solve a problem. So to summarize all that, on the left-hand side, we have very positive things. We have a compelling value proposition. The adoption rate is growing. We're penetrating the entire bioprocess. But boy, look at the other side of that slide. We've got a number of underpinning challenges that we need to solve in order to continue these growth rates. So one might say there's a huge opportunity or maybe a requirement for improvement here if we're going to continue to feed the growth rates that we want to feed. So what does all this mean to a supplier? So when we embark on a development project today, we want to try and look forward, look at these challenges and address these challenges. And so what I'm talking about here is our new film called FlexSafe and how we use the elements and the identified challenges in the market to drive the development. So for any of you who have been involved in a product development process, it all comes down to taking user requirements, translating them into technical specifications for the product. And so we decided we were not going to be able to do it the way we've always done it and solve the challenges of today. So we sat down with and collaborated with two partners here. The first partner, of course, is our film extrusion partner. So we're in a contract manufacturing relationship with a film extrusion company that extrudes our films to our specification. And we said, that's not good enough. Just controlling the film and the film process is not good enough. We want to reach back all the way in the supply chain, back to the resin, back to the additives. And so we created, in partnership with our film contract manufacturer, a relationship with the resin company. We were able to sit down together and say, everybody, all the stakeholders in this process need to bring their needs to the table and work out what the right solution is here. And so, for instance, our expertise is, of course, in the making of the raw film into bags, so we need weldability. We also know the applications for those bags, so we need to know about its flexibility, its strength, and the different properties for making bags. But then the film guys come to the party and say, well, we care about extrusion, and we want to control by these elements. And in order to extrude, we need the additive properties to look like that. And then we say, well, wait, additive properties, we've got to be careful with that because that can affect our extractables profile. So in this iterative relationship and a collaborative relationship, together with the film and resin suppliers, we were able to define a different solution. So really, within this collaborative relationship, we're also trying to use the elements of quality by design. And what quality by design brings to us is it starts with the process development, and it's really about understanding the manufacturing process and what variation of that manufacturing process has on the end characteristics of the product. And then you use that in a continuous improvement mode. So one example of using quality by design in our film development process, obviously the Amgen experience was looming very large in everybody's minds. Now, the degradant that they found to have an effect on cell growth was or is an antioxidant that is widely used in polyethylene to protect during the thermal processing from further degradation. So what we wanted to do was do an experiment to ensure that within the process parameters of the film extrusion process, that we were able to maintain all of the critical parameters of the film. So what you can see here is we bounded the process, and so we did 11 different extrusion runs, and you can see the cube there. There's 3 different key parameters. You've got extrusion temperature, chill roll temperature, and output speed. And by varying those 3 within the dimensions that the film manufacturer wanted to control within, we were able to create our design space. Then within that design space, we evaluate the film critical process parameters on cell growth. And so what you can see here is the cell growth assay that Sartorius developed, which is shown to be as sensitive as the Amgen cell line to the bisphenol ditert butyl phenyl phosphate effect. Here you can see that within our design space, we had no negative effect on cell growth. So to take this one step further, though, it's not just about assurance of supply, isn't just about business continuity, isn't just about consistency of quality, and isn't just about change control, as I talked about during all the challenges we recognize here. Assurance of supply is really the combination of those 3 things. So this shows a different view of the process, the single-use supply chain, let's say, for a bag assembly. You start with resin or multiple different resins, make it into film, make it into a bag, bring together your components, then you do your assembly, bring it to sterilization. And what you can see here is we have a mix of using partner suppliers, being vertically integrated, and using contract manufacturers. So the resin and film are done by contract manufacturing. The bag and components are either done, the bags are done vertically within. Components are either with partners or vertical, and then we assemble and send it out for gamma. each of these steps of this chain need to be controlled for quality assurance, assurance of supply, and change control, assurance of supply being that business continuity piece in the middle there. So I'm just going to break down and drill down a little bit in each of those steps about what we're doing for each of those three elements of the assurance of supply. So for resin, from a business continuity standpoint, we're transitioning from buying resin from a resin supplier or from a dealer based on a part number. Instead, we've now transitioned to defining what resin specification and recipe is being made for us. Now, it's very important, though, that the PD626 example taught us that we didn't want to use additives or base polymers that were, let's say, exotic. We didn't want to be in a niche market space that the commitment of the supplier wouldn't necessarily be there on the long haul. So there you can see we're only using mainstream polymers and additives. This is stuff that these are materials that are serving way bigger markets than the broad market, than the bioprocess market. And so we believe that the commitment of our suppliers will remain there for the long haul. Of course, we've got, because we are having our resin manufactured to our specification, we can always qualify, or we're in qualification of a second supplier. Now, from a consistent quality and performance standpoint, the resin specification and the control of that recipe and the specifications ensures that on a batch-to-batch basis. We, of course, are in a quality agreement and a contractual business agreement with the supplier, and that's shown there. In terms of change control, again, the same elements are in play there, where we've got an agreed-upon specification, we're controlling the recipe, and we're covered by a quality agreement and contractual arrangement regarding change control. So, going one step further down that supply chain now, we're talking about the contract manufacturing on our film. So when I talk about business continuity, we're in a relationship with a leading supplier of films that has multiple manufacturing sites with a long-term partnership in place. We have a contractual agreement regarding safety stock. Should they decide to terminate the contract, we have a last-time buy option that would allow us to extend the change to multiple years while we bring in another contract manufacturer. And then a second extruder is in qualification, and we have a rolling inventory. So should there be a business continuity issue, we have that inventory available to us. From a quality and performance standpoint, from a lot-to-lot, batch-to-batch variation, we believe we've covered that entire variation with our design space and confirmed within that design space we get consistent quality and performance. We've optimized our antioxidant package, and we've removed slip agents from the formulation. From a change control standpoint, of course, once again, the process is bounded by our design space, and we have a contractual relationship that requires that they continuously operate within that design space. And, of course, we have a quality agreement in place. For final assemblies, of course, this is our own operation. So from a business continuity standpoint, we have two primary manufacturing sites, two secondary manufacturing sites, and we are building a third site as we speak. Each of these sites has redundant capabilities. They have duplicate quality systems, duplicate capabilities and equipment, and the quality system control of the finished chambers. From a change control standpoint, again, this is our own internal change control processes, and with these within our quality system and our internal change control process and procedures. For components, if they're vertically integrated, meaning that we're putting our own components on a finished assembly, it would be covered by all the things in the prior slide. But with working with partners, many of the people who you see here at Interphex, generally we cover ourselves with rolling safety stocks, contracts from a business continuity standpoint, the consistent quality and change control we cover based on contract and based on our quality agreements that are in place. For Gamma, of course, we have multiple sites from each and every one of our manufacturing sites has a minimum of 2 qualified gamma radiation suppliers. Of course, every single system we sell has a sterility assurance level of 10 to the minus 6th, and excuse me, using multiple contract suppliers with quality agreements in place with each of them assures the consistency. So in conclusion, this novel approach to bringing a film to market by a product development that reached into the issues regarding supply chain gives us consistent cell growth performance across the entire range, an unprecedented level of assurance of supply. What we didn't talk about significantly, but of course one of the growing needs of the market is for larger systems and more robustness. This was built into the design of this film. And this film is going to be rolled out across all the applications we serve. And I think you could well see that Sartorius Stedim serves the broadest range of bioprocess applications in single use, and this film will be rolled out from upstream to downstream, fill finish, and freezing applications as well. And so we really believe that with embracing those needs of the market and by changing our approach to working with our suppliers back through the supply chain, by partnering with them through the development process, we've really changed the landscape on how single-use systems are brought to market. So with that, I'll thank you, and feel free to ask questions. All right. Well, if there are no further questions or any questions at all, I'll thank you very much.